Oliver Pichwan Luthier here, and today what I'm going to show you is how to rough out the neck and headstock. We're going to rough it out and glue it together. And so here what I have is a piece of African Sipo mahogany, and it's about, in terms of its dimensions, this is just a little over 3 inches square, 3¼ inches square here, 3 by 3¼ is actually what it is. And I wanted to point out that if we look at the end grain on this, we can see that the grain of the wood is running across at a slight diagonal, almost vertical, so it is like almost quarter sawn, and it is going at this slight angle like this. Now that would be the way we would want to show the neck. We would want to have the neck so that it sat like this, and that this would be where the fretboard would go on this particular piece of mahogany. But I don't like it when the grain is going off at an angle like that, slightly. I mean, if it's not perfectly vertical, I mean, we could recut it that way, but we would lose a lot of the wood in that way. And actually, there's a solution to this that I like, which is that I usually put a spine in all of my necks. And the spine is usually either Indian rosewood or ebony, usually the gaboon ebony that I put in them. And when I do that, what I'm going to do is rip this in half this way, and then I'll flip this other piece over so that we'll get a book match on the grain of the end grain of the mahogany with the spine in. And here's a piece that I've done that I can show you, and you can see the grain in there. How what I've done is I've taken this and ripped it, and then have it so that the grain is going symmetrical here. It's book matched around the spine, which in this case is a piece of Indian rosewood, and then it's got 2 little pieces of maple veneer glued in there because it looks really pretty. And the reason for doing this is that if there are any kinds of internal stresses in the wood, it's going to be balanced from side to side, and that will avoid any warp. In terms of flexing up and down, the spine of either rosewood or ebony is extremely strong and will prevent any of that, because as you know, ukuleles do not have truss rods. So that is what we're going to do to this piece of mahogany. I've already done another one. This is just a blank that I have for making more. So I'm going to put this away. And I've already taken this piece and I've glued it up with a piece of ebony in the middle with the little pieces of maple on the side. And it gives a really nice pattern here, as you can see on the surface of that. Now I've already rough cut this out because I have a little template that I made here out of plastic, and I can put that on here like this, and I rough cut it. And what I found is that if I have my piece of mahogany, and I can get 2 necks and 2 headstocks out of one piece, because I cut one this way, and then I have the other one that I can cut the other way. So that gives me this piece, and I've already made another one out of the other side of this, and in the center I can get this piece here, which is just the right thickness once I've planed it down and adjusted it for the headstock. And so the headstock is going to be made out of the same chunk of wood as the neck, and so it'll match perfectly. And it also has that same pattern of the grain being book matched on the end grain. So it makes it very strong. So what we're going to do now is, since we've done this, we're going to, and you can see how this piece came out of here, and then the other one was that way, like this. It was like that. The other neck. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the scarf joint here, because I think scarf joint is the strongest joint for attaching the headstock, and this is going to have a slotted headstock, this ukulele, and I'll show how to do the slotted headstock at another time. So what we're going to do is we're going to glue the, if you can see how that, let me see if I can show it better here. If we're going to glue this piece on at this angle here, and we're going to cut this at an angle across this way, and then glue this on, and that gives us the scarf joint, which is considered the strongest joint for attaching the headstock to the neck. The reason for not making the entire, not, let's say, cutting it out like this, but cutting it down and then cutting the headstock right into the same piece of wood is that then the grain of this piece would be going straight across, and if that was going straight across here, then this would have a tendency to split right where the headstock is attached, or not attached, but it would be the same piece. The grain would be going the wrong way and the headstock could break off. So this makes it much stronger to put a scarf joint in there. Now there are two ways to do the scarf joint. One way is to run the headstock all the way up like this, and the other way is to cut this at an angle and attach the headstock to underneath, like this, like that. But if we do it that way, we only have a very small joint because this is only 5/8 of an inch thick, the headstock piece. The reason it's 5/8 and not thinner, a lot of ukuleles, if they have solid peg heads, they'll have much thinner, but because we have tuning machines that are going into a slotted head that screw on the side, they require a wider or thicker headstock. So we're going to go with this 5/8, and by the time we glue on the headstock veneers, which will be a piece of maple and then a piece of ebony on top of that, then we'll have just the right thickness for the tuning machines. Now here's that little fretboard that we were working on before, and you can see how nicely it's come out, and you can see how the bindings on the side are actually covering all the slots, so that we will step our fret when we do it. To go over that, we'll step the tang, so the tang will go in there, and then the crown of the fret will just go over the edge of that binding on it. This little smile on the end came out really nice. So I think this is a really sweet little fretboard, and I'm going to do the inlay on it as soon as I figure out what design my client would like for it. So in terms of cutting this, we know that it's 9 and 15/32 from the 14th fret to the nut. That's the distance on this particular fretboard. Now this is going to have a 17-inch scale, which is the distance from the nut to the saddle is 17 inches, and it'll actually be a little bit more because we always give it a little extra, few 30-seconds, just because when you're playing the instrument and you press down on the string, you're actually shortening the string, and we want the intonation to be perfect. So I always add a little bit onto those, which is customary. Now, so what I've also done is that we're going to cut a dovetail on this, and on this end here, and that dovetail is going to be like this. This is the dovetail that we're going to cut, and it's going to be a tapered or dovetail, and then into the body we're going to cut the female portion of that so that this will slide right into it like that. Well, on our dovetail is going to be 9/16. So what I've done is I've measured back 9/16 here, and then we're going to measure across from here. We're going to measure 9 and 15/32, which is going to give us the distance to the nut. So we have 9 and 15/32 right here. But we also want the nut to be sitting on top of the flat part of the instrument. So to do that, then, and here would be the nut. So this is a nut that's going to sit here like this, and then the fretboard is going to come in like this, like that. And that gives us right here where we have our mark, because that extra portion is for the dovetail, is that gives us the distance that we want. And then the angle of the headstock is going to descend from the point of the this anterior portion of the nut. So this nut is going to just sit right like that. This is just a nut that I use for marking. So what that means is that we have then this mark right here, and the nuts that I use on, you know, most guitar nuts are like around 1/4 of an inch in terms of their thickness. On a ukulele, I like ones that are a little thinner because it's a smaller instrument, so I use ones that are 3/16. And I usually make these myself because you can't really, it's hard to find nut material, this is bone, unbleached bone. And the reason that I use unbleached bone is that bleaching the bone actually weakens the bone, so unbleached bone is stronger. So now that we have that marked, we know that this is where we're going to take it to that point. And so the angle that we're going to do this is going to be 11 degrees. So if we take our square here, and we come down and we make a mark here, this is going to be the top of the fretboard. I mean the top of the peg head. But it's going to be the top of the peg head which is going to be underneath the veneer. I like to place the veneer on top to trap the nut so that the nut just isn't sitting up against the edge of the fretboard. So, you know, from the side view here, you can see that if this is sitting like this, you know, if we have the headstock veneer come up and then on the other side of the nut, then it traps the nut in there so that the nut is basically in a slot between the fingerboard and the veneer. So that being the case, we have to come back 5/8 of an inch in order to have room for this to sit there. So this will sit there just like that. So then if we come in, we know that we've made that mark. That's where this is going to sit, is right there. And we mark it on this side. And then we are going to mark this, which is going to be where our cut is. So we're going to cut this here, and then we're going to glue this piece on like that. And we'll just let it kind of run wild a little bit up there, because what we'll do is then we'll trim it off later to get it perfectly flush, so that the top of this piece here, which is basically part of the headstock, will be flush with this, and that the fretboard will actually glue on to a portion of it there. So right now we're going to cut this piece right here. So we'll take it over to the bandsaw, and let's see if I can get this to. My camera work, I know, leaves a lot to be desired, but it's what I got. So anyway, I don't know if I can show that very well. Anyway, there we go. I think this will work. I'm going to raise this up a little bit because it's a little thicker. And that looks about right. So we're going to cut this piece. If this is not in the way. Okay, I think that'll work. And then we're going to adjust this, we're going to plane it by hand. We'll plane it by hand to make sure it's right where we want it to be. So I'll get the vacuum going on this. so now we have this cut at our 11-degree angle. And we're going to glue this piece on like that. Now, obviously that's a terrible joint, so we're going to have to really refine this joint to make sure that it's just the way we want it. And we're going to do that. I'm going to run it over the joiner first to get it roughed. As I always do, I cut these things extra to give myself room, because I want to make sure that we have plenty of meat there to work with. So I'm going to run that over the jointer. Get the vacuum going on this. I have vacuum system on all of the tools in my shop to avoid having sawdust everywhere. Now we've got this kind of rough, and you can see that it's actually cut at it. The joiner's kind of taken it off a little bit at an angle, and we don't want that because we want this to be square. So we're going to take care of the rest of this with a hand plane. I'm going to put it here in the vise. So it was a good idea to have things really, and we're just going to check this here, make sure we've got our 11 degrees, and it is right on, right there. It's right on. But the way we're going to check this angle on this is by taking our square, and we know that this angle, when this is tilted the right way, so that the fingerboard will be square with the peg head, then this should be square also on this end, and of course it's off now. It exaggerates it because of the angle, but we also know that if it should be on this end too. Oops, I dropped my square. I don't like dropping my square. It ran into the edge of the vise there, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to put this line right here, because that tells me where I want that to be. Okay. And so we're going to plane that down so that it's where we want it. doing. This is how you adjust it. Plane is set really nicely. I can even see right through the little pores of the wood. And we're just about there. We want this scarf joint to be perfect. So that looks really good all across there. And this is now square on this end. There's a little spot here. But I think that we'll be all right there because that's going to be, this is much wider than it needs to be. Obviously, because we only need at this end, you know, about that wide, right? This is all going to get cut off, this extra portion here. So we'll just do a little more. We want it to make it. Also for the gluing purposes of gluing, we want it perfect. Okay, and my pencil line is still very good. You know, it's right where, and this pencil line that I made is actually where I made that other line before. So that's. Yeah, and that's as smooth as glass. So when I lay my plane down, I always lay them on the side, never on the face. Now we want to make sure that this fits really well. Here I like to make this joint so that you can't even see it when it's all glued together. And it looks pretty good right now. It's not wobbling or anything. But I'm just going to go over it real lightly with my block. Sanding block here. Make sure it's perfectly flat. Okay. Let's make sure our angle is still right on. That's absolutely perfect. You can see here, if I show you that this angle is right where it needs to be. Right there. Okay, the camera. There you go. You can see that that's right there at 11 degrees. So this piece is good. So now on this piece, I've run this over the joiner, and the joiner always, there's always a little bit of a, I can feel little slight ridges where the joiner has gone, because there might be a very slight little nick or something in the blade. So on this piece, I'm going to go over it with this as well. So that I'm sure that it's absolutely flat and there are no little lumps or bumps or anything in there. Now we want to make sure that our orientation of this is the same as the orientation of this. So it's on the top, it's coming together, and towards the base, it's going apart. So if we look at this, we have that same configuration here. So we want that to be like this. And we're going to glue that on right there. Now this is a lot longer than what we need. So if we pull this down, we've got it sanded clear down to there where it's perfectly flat. Always watch out there's not any snipe on the end of the piece from the joiner. But you can see here that our joint is absolutely right in there. You can see it's perfect. So that's what we want. Now we have more of this than what we need, and so if we have this glued on right at that point, and we take our straight edge and mark across here, give ourselves a little extra here just to make sure that there's no issues. I always give myself extra, and then we can trim it off later. So if we're here, that means that our headstock, the fingerboard, is going to go clear to here, like this. The rest of this piece here is going over onto the body of the instrument, and then we have room for the nut, which is going to sit right here, like that. And then we have the headstock, which is going to go like this. So yeah, we have plenty of to work with here. We could actually almost, I think, looks like we could even get 2 headstocks out of this one piece, but we would have to cut this at an angle here, right in the center, like this. But actually it'd be kind of tight on this piece, so I think we'll just keep it the way it is. So we're going to glue this on just like this. We don't need quite so much of all of this, so I'm going to trim it back a little bit. We're just going to cut it off about here. Make sure that we have plenty in case, before. It's always better to have more. You can always cut it off, but you can't put it back on. So I'm just going to trim that off right there. I'll just zip it off on the bandsaw. Actually, I'll just do it on the table so it'll be easier. On right here. So, okay, and we want to make sure that everything's lined up well. We can see that because this line is going to carry through, and we can see that it just is pretty good there, where it lines up on this side, and on this side it's also perfect. So that's what we want, and we know that the orientation this way, that these two surfaces are they're not at angles to each other, so that's a good thing. So now we're going to glue this on, and we'll do this I'll hold it here in the vise, and that's it can be tricky, because what happens is when you put